Hello and welcome to Profit, Grow, Exit, the podcast for business owners who don't just want to grow a business, but want one worth owning, running, and eventually selling. I'm Abby Walsh, and today's episode is all about what it really takes to move from operator to owner. I'm joined by two people who live and breathe this work from very different but highly complementary angles. Shawn Walsh is the author of The Pumpkin Plan for Managed Service Providers, where he helps MSPs focus, simplify, and build businesses that are not just bigger, but better. David Jenyns is an experienced entrepreneur who built and sold businesses in his early 20s, including the Melbourne Cricket Ground, then went on to found Melbourne SEO services, and in 2016, he successfully systemized himself out of that business and founded SYSTEMology, with a mission to help business owners scale without being trapped in day-to-day operations. In this conversation, we're going to dig into why most entrepreneurs struggle with systems, how the right operator changes everything, and what it actually takes to build a business that's profitable, scalable, and exit ready. Let's get into it. So, both of you work with growth stage companies, but from different angles. Before we dive into everything today, I'd love to hear how each of you truly defines the real transition point from operator to owner. David, you want to get started with us?
Yeah, I think about the business owner that's wearing many hats. They are surrounded by a small team, yet everything bottlenecks through them. They are the knight in shining armor. They are the person that everybody turns to get their answers, whether it's prospects or clients or team members. And it's that skill that they've developed of problem solving that actually helped them grow to where they are and be quite successful. It just also then becomes the same thing that chains them to the business, making them the business. And if they're not working, their business isn't working. So it's a common challenge that every business owner faces, and many get stuck. But to build a business that gives you freedom, you've really got to move through this gap and start to break some of those old habits.
Very true. Shawn, would you agree with that? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, 100%. Everything that David said is, I may say it differently. And the analogy that I use when working with entrepreneurs is that it's the double-edged sword of entrepreneurship. We got to this place with our companies because it was an idea that we had. We created it. We, as the founder and entrepreneur, can typically do everything in the job. We can provide the service. We can do the sales. We will generate the bill, after we go home and send the bill to the client. And we get to this point because we can do everything in our company. But then we hit a certain plateau and the company stops growing because we are still doing everything in the company. And at some point we have to flip our mindset to I can do everything to I should be teaching other people how to do everything. And you need to become an instructor and you need to build process that so that other people can deliver the service that you've been providing and the client gets the same or better result. That is a company that is now scalable. And you have gone from being self-employed to actually owning a business, because that's the problem. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who say I own a business, but really what they have is a job. And we want to get the entrepreneurs out of having a job and being a business owner where they've actually created something that stands on its own.
I love something you said there, Shawn, which is a magical word for me. My ears always prick up when I hear the word process because I feel like that is the tool by which you bridge this gap where you start to move from tribal knowledge and everything that's trapped in your head. And through process, we're able to transplant that and make that accessible. So, yeah, love it.
And process is going to be a key of what we're going to talk about today. But getting to when an owner or a founder gets to that point, David, what point would you say that just work harder, it might stop working for an owner or a founder of a business?
It's when you hit that ceiling that Shawn talks about, and the business stops growing because there's only so much capacity, there's only so much time in the day, and you're stretched. Oftentimes, there's a breaking point. Usually it can be burnout, it can be someone getting sick, whether it's a family member or yourself. Sometimes it can be realizing, oh, we're about to get married, or maybe as you're getting older, you're thinking about what retirement and exit might look like. There's a lot of these triggers that really get you to go, ah, this is not working for me. We try and engineer that trigger, but it's actually very hard. The trigger almost needs to come from within the entrepreneur to say, all right, enough's enough. I'm stretched too thin. I've got to do something about it.
And this can be geared toward both of you, but do you think, you talked about burnout and maybe some of these, do you think founders typically realize that they've reached that point, or does it just show up as chaos first?
David, I'll let you
I've
run with that.
always been, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs are, they're grinded out type of people. Like
Yeah.
they paper over any cracks by working harder. So they'll often just keep going and inserting themselves into parts of the business where they may or may not be adding great value, and they think they're helping, but they're stepping on the toes of the team members. And then you're right, that's when it starts to bubble up as a little bit of chaos, because the entrepreneur's brain works differently. It has a million ideas a minute, and it's sometimes very challenging for the team to handle that, and having someone in between, a right-hand man or woman that becomes the filter for the team to grow through to that next level is really, really key, because it limits that chaos. But most definitely, there's a certain level of chaos that happens in all business, but it seems particularly high at certain points in this journey.
Yeah, I have a hat that I wear a lot of times that says chaos coordinator, so I can relate there. Shawn, in pumpkin plan terms, when can growth maybe start to hurt a business instead of helping it?
Sure. So in the Pumpkin Plan, in both the original book by Mike Michalowicz and our version for managed service providers, we talk about finding your sweet spot. And that's the intersection of three things. And one is systemization, because we've got to get all the stuff out of our head and into a process that other people can follow. And the other parts of that is knowing who we serve and knowing what our unique value is that we provide for the client. And if we can hit that intersection, that's the sweet spot. But to David's point, entrepreneurs get so used to firefighting that they wear that ability to run into chaos and solve the problem as a badge of honor. And it's sometimes, we become adrenaline junkies, I think, again, talking about how the mind of the entrepreneur is different than other people. We get off on that adrenaline kick, and it's addictive. And it's very hard to say, you know what, I'm going to take this nice, boring process that's going to allow other people to do these things, and I'm just going to sit here, because you're not getting that constant adrenaline rush. But again, it's the only way to scale. It's the only way not to burn your team out or to burn yourself out. And I do think a lot of business owners, if their company is growing, particularly if it's growing rapidly, that they're doing this firefighting, they're getting satisfaction from it, but they don't realize how quickly they're burning out. And by the time they realize, it's usually not at a good place. So realizing that ahead of time before you hit that wall and have to deal with that aspect too is very good for your own mental health as well as the health of the business. But sometimes people have to hit the wall before they realize they raise their hand and they go, hey, I need some help here. So
Hopefully, this episode can help people before they hit the wall. One thing that we touched on before this recording is that many entrepreneurs genuinely value process, but they're often the worst people to implement it. So, David, why have you found that owners are so bad at documenting and enforcing process, even if they intellectually believe in it?
Yeah. I think entrepreneurs are move fast, solve problems type of people that Shawn was talking about a little bit earlier there. So that's what they're drawn to, and that's what they're naturally gifted at. The idea of slowing down to go fast doesn't always connect with them, and they just see process sometimes as maybe a necessary evil, or maybe that's someone else's problem. And even when there's process in place, some founders will often think that they're above the law, when really, when you're operating within the system, you need to follow the system rules, and your business is a system. So I think it's maybe just a habit thing. Maybe it's just what they like. I mean, I write about systems and talk about it all day and have done for the past 10 years. And maybe the dirty little secret of David Jenyns is I don't like documenting process myself. I don't like writing checklists. I don't like writing things out. But what I've done is I've tricked my brain. I've fallen in love with what the process brings and the result that it brings to the business. And now I realize that it's a night and day difference between businesses that have process versus those that don't. So I also, when I work with team members, my right-hand lady, she once said that I break my EAs. Like, once an EA works with me, she can't actually move into the rest of the business and work in other roles, because she lets me operate in a little silo on my little side projects, and we don't follow process, and we break things, and, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? Let's add this in. And then that EA learns those habits, which then makes it very hard for them to integrate in with the rest of the team. So for better or for worse, I mean, that's the way that I work. I've figured out what I'm good at and how I work. And when I'm working on my own, that's the way that I work. But when I'm in the bigger machine that is the system of the business, then I will follow the rules.
That's kind of funny. And I think Shawn and I can probably relate over here at Encore.
on the process piece with business owners too, the one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that when I was doing research for my upcoming book, I was speaking at a conference and we were talking about neurodiversity. And the reality is of the general population, 2% approximately is ADHD. But when you narrow that sample to entrepreneurs, over 42% of entrepreneurs are ADHD. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're 800% more likely to be dyslexic. So talk about two things that would give you a natural affinity to not doing process, but needing process more than everybody else. So what I found as an entrepreneur was I was not going to be the person to write the process, because, I fall into those categories, and I'm going to wind up, I'll have 37 processes, 1/3 done, but I found team members that were very strong in process, and I could do a brain dump with them and they could turn it into a process. So as an entrepreneur, if you know that writing the process is your weak spot, make sure that you partner with somebody who it's their strength. Good entrepreneurs surround themselves with people that are smarter than them, or complement their skill set. And this is one of those areas that it could be really crucial.
That
I
is the
think that
greatest unlock that I've found. Like, Shawn hit the nail on the head for me. Like, that is one of the greatest leverage points for bridging the gap through process.
Absolutely.
And I think that statistic begs the question, is it a skill set issue or is it a psychological neurodivergency issue?
And it could be one, the other, or a combination.
Yeah, definitely. Now, jumping back to owners of businesses being in the operations, Shawn, is there a hidden cost to an owner staying in an operational role for too long?
Absolutely. So if you go to sell the company, the first thing a potential buyer is going to look at is, what do I need to do to replace you? Or when I buy the company, do I need to keep you around for a period of time to phase you out because you're still wearing hats? Um, what? And some people that works for, other people sticking around after you sell the company is not fun. And there's usually what they call an earn out period. And now you are responsible for the performance of a company that you no longer own and no longer have authority to make decisions for. I mean, so you've got all the responsibility and none of the authority, which is a terrible place to be. So by making sure that you get rid of all the hats. And your goal as a business owner should be that you're 100% working on the business and 0% working in the business. That if you've done that, then when a buyer comes along, you can just cash the check and ride off into the sunset. So there can truly be a cost, both psychologically and in a dollar and cent standpoint, if you as an entrepreneur don't get yourself out of doing the job.
It's a really good point. And I do want to jump in, David, about the systems champion, because that becomes really powerful as we talk about where you go as an owner. So tell us, what exactly is a systems champion?
A systems champion is the first supporter of the initiative of building a systems culture. So the business owner comes up with the idea. They say, I want to own a systems driven business, but they recognize that they're not the best person to be documenting the process. So they identify someone in the team who is the first person who goes, yes, I believe in this as well. This is something that I want to join in on. I want to help you make this happen. And they champion the idea. They're the fire starter. They capture those first few processes. They set the standard. They create the system for creating systems. They meet with other team members and teach them how it's done. They make it easy for other team members, and they get all of the framework and scaffolding into place so that the rest of the team can jump on board. They also identify the second and third and fourth supporters. So you always go to the people that naturally gravitate this and want to join in on this initiative. And you celebrate that success and you mention it in team meetings and you give out awards and you share new processes that are documented. And the systems champion really helps to get that fire started. They also become naturally, oftentimes, a systems and AI champion, because
Mm.
once you understand deeply how things are done and what is being done inside an organization and the way certain tasks are completed, then it's natural for them to go, and how do we improve this? How does AI help us do that faster, cheaper, and better? So it's also a role that has dramatically changed through the power of AI. Historically, maybe this was a lean or Six Sigma consultant that wants 150 grand a year, whereas now a systems champion can be a junior person who's straight out of uni, who knows how to do the technical work but doesn't know how to run the business of the technical work, who's hungry and curious and wants to learn and naturally process driven. That person, power them up with some AI tools and almost create a mentor-mentee relationship where they meet with team members to help them capture best practice, and it's a magical combination.
That's really great too, because I think that there are a lot of folks right out of school who would take so much ownership of that and really enjoy that kind of relationship. Now, we talked a little bit about DISC, and here at Encore, Shawn and I use DISC a lot. Are there, Shawn, I'll direct this one at you. Is there a DISC personality or pattern that you might look for if you were looking for or creating a systems champion?
Yeah, I think a good systems champion is probably going to fall into the DC profile because they are the high D is results driven, wants to accomplish the goal, wants to accomplish the goal efficiently. But the high C person is data driven and they want to make sure that we do it the right way and that it is done precisely correct. And in some ways, that creates what we refer to as a me conflict because it's, I want it fast, but I want it right. And, but the people who fit the DC role, who have that personality type, typically we see them being very successful in roles like COOs and people who are very operational, hands-on, but very process-driven, but also very results-driven.
I'm going to direct this one at Shawn because I know from personal experience that he has a good story for this one. But what tensions can show up between a visionary founder and a systems-driven operator? And how does a healthy team resolve that?
Well, now I'm wondering what story you were referring to, 'cause there's so many there. But the visionary founder is a big picture thinker, and they tend to not be the detail person. And going right back to what we were saying at the beginning, that sometimes the people who create the process are not necessarily the best person to document the process. And self-awareness is a big thing that can help that. And yes, and there's going to be conflict there. But if you have self-awareness of your communication style and what your strengths and weaknesses are, you can partner with the right person with the right profile on your team to ensure that you get to the results that you're looking to achieve.
Great.
New unlock here to add to this idea of the systems champion, and we're talking about, potentially a right-hand man or woman who's that operator. I actually find oftentimes your best team members are the most busy team members, and systems are always important, but they're never urgent. So for the busy person, there's very little space for it. One thing that we're actually finding is getting a junior who has capacity and is maybe overseen by a great operator, that's a great combination because they can go out there and use some of these new tools to power away at it and get it done. Because sometimes, capacity can be an issue.
David, have you ever found a scenario where an owner tries to force themselves into the system champion role instead of empowering someone else?
Quite commonly, because the business owner, they can do everything. They're Superman, Superwoman. They can absolutely do this. They can solve any problem that's thrown at them, and they can. But it's, I think the more that you're in business, the more that you realize leaning into your strengths is actually a better place for you to sit. And then, like Shawn mentioned, you build the team around you that really complement and fill in the gaps where you're not as strong or it's not your sweet spot. The business owner really needs to be operating where their zone of genius is, which is oftentimes problem solving. And problem solving exists where process does not. So they come in and they solve the problem for the first time, and then the process is what gets inserted in behind them to make sure that problem is solved once and for all. So we want to try and get them working where they're adding the most value, and documenting a process is not $500 or $1,000 work, like an hour. Like we want to make sure
Right.
that they're working on the highest value tasks.
A lot of founders or business owners hear that they need to step out of operations and they panic because they feel like they're going to lose control. Are there systems that actually give owners more control and not less while they're stepping out of that maybe day-to-day operation role?
One of the first things, like, I don't actually think a business owner wants to micromanage. I know oftentimes they can, and it can feel like that they want to. The only reason they micromanage is because they're invested in getting a certain outcome and a result, and they want something done to an appropriate standard. That's why they step in. So one of the first things you can do is, at least by writing a process, we're setting the standard and what the expectation is. And if you can start using a project management platform that gets everything out in the open, so you create a transparent, accountable organization, so it's clear who is doing what by when, and the business owner can jump into various different tasks and see where they're up to if they wanted to. That's actually a great first step for letting go, because if they feel like there's some sort of visibility and they could jump in if they want, maybe at the start they do, but then over time they just learn, oh yes, well, it's kind of happening. If I want to look, I can, but I probably don't want to look if it's being done correctly.
Yeah. Shawn, how have you seen owners let go of control while still protecting what makes the business special?
Building the right team, having the right personalities on the team, having people who reflect your core values, because if they reflect your core values and they are champions of the core values of the company, then you are going to be able to let go much more easily, because you're going to feel more comfortable that they are going to treat the client and each other the way that you want the company to run. So building your team correctly is really, to me, the first step of being able to let go, because there has to be trust. And if you're not hiring the right people, or you're hiring people just for skill set and not for culture fit, that trust is going to be harder to build.
Yeah, I'm curious what both of your answers will be to this, but what is the first process that you document if your goal is freedom? And what's the first thing that you would tell a business owner to stop doing immediately?
This one, there are lots of different ways to solve this problem. Mike Michalowicz has some ideas. Dan Martell, buy back your time. We have a particular approach. I think the key is just to get started. Some ideas on where I do it and how I would approach it would be, firstly, the first couple of systems you get in place. I mean, the cheeky answer is to go, oh, yes, you need a system to create systems. Like, that's my first answer. But when we think about actually the systems that are running the business, I think the very first system needs to be something that's easy, because you want to make that first document to don't go for the most complex thing and try and systemize the heck out of it and get all different variations and just create this absolute monstrosity. Start with something simple. And generally, I like to do it thinking in terms of, we've got a method we call the critical client flow. It's just a simple workflow that helps you identify how the business delivers value to an end client. It's like, how do you grab that person's attention? How do you handle an incoming inquiry? How do you sell them? How do you take some money? How do you onboard them? How do you deliver? How do you get them to come back? And we do that high level at the start. And then I often say, where in that critical client flow is the pain? Because I now know, well, I've kind of limited of all of the infinite possibilities of where you could start. I've at least limited it down to where the business makes money. And then if I say, and where's the pain? Where's the bottleneck? Where's the bit where it always rests on the shoulders of the business owner? And maybe it's quoting, maybe it's onboarding a client, maybe it's the sales process, maybe we're not getting to the leads quick enough. That oftentimes can be a great place to start because it's genuinely a problem, and starting there it will just move the business forward.
All right. Shawn?
Very much the same. There is no right or wrong answer. One of the things that I ask entrepreneurs to do is to document where they're spending their time. And there's a tool called an Eisenhower matrix, okay, named for President Eisenhower in the US. And the idea is what you do is you look at the tasks that you're doing and you put them into one of four quadrants. And is it urgent? You're asking, is it urgent or is it not urgent? Is it important or is it not important? Because business owners tend to let the urgent but not necessarily the important take over everything. And we have to make time for for the important. There is always urgent things when you own a business. So we will never get to the important things if we don't learn how to delegate. So look at those things, and if it's important and urgent, you still do it. But if it's not important, but it's urgent, delegate it. Find other people can do it, train them to do it. Oftentimes, to David's point, for the owner of a small business, billing, way too many business owners who don't get bills, especially when you're a solo, when you're just learning to expand. Billing always gets done late. You're waiting often way too long to get your money. So billing may be the first one that makes sense. There are some people out there who profess that you should always, especially nowadays where people can work remotely easily, that you should get a virtual assistant. That should be the first. Get all that admin stuff off your plate, and either one of those would be a great first way to start delegating. But look at your time, document. If it's important and urgent, you do it. If it's not important but urgent, delegate it. If it's important but not urgent, you can schedule it always for later. And of course, if it's not urgent and not important, get rid of it. So,
It's interesting that you say that because that brings me back to the statistic that you gave us about business owners having ADHD. And one of the, as somebody who's an entrepreneur with ADHD, one of the things that I struggle with, and I know a lot of folks struggle with, is that executive dysfunction where you have a difficult time assigning urgency to certain tasks. So I know for myself, writing them down and looking at them helps me assign that level of urgency. So that sounds like it would be a really good task for a lot of business owners based on that statistic.
yeah. You know what? And sometimes you need to make that list and bounce it off somebody else. Whether it's if you have an existing team member, you can say, how would you rate these things in sense of urgency? Or maybe you go to the
Yeah.
significant other if you don't have a team member yet. But make sure you use your support system to make sure that use your support system to guide you to the right answer.
Well, let's give our listeners some actionable items here. I would love to ask you, David, if an owner or a founder of a business is listening to this right now and thinking, I know who my systems champion is. What is the next step for them, or the first step?
I'm glad you asked. You get them a copy of the Systems Champion book. No, I think
There was a plug a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But give us a
no,
sneak peek.
David, they have to get your other book first.
That's right. Well, they're correct. The first one's for the business owner. You're right, and then this one is for the team member who helps the business owner. I think every business owner I chat with goes, okay, we agree systems are important. So we're over that. Then we go, okay, well, now we need to make sure that we get attention to them. We need to make them urgent and important. So we start getting to work on it. Or maybe to Shawn's point, maybe we need to delegate that one off to the systems champion. One thing, because I did some work with Michael Gerber, he wrote the book The E-Myth, which is he's kind of like the godfather of small business systems. And one thing that he said to me after he read Systemology was he said, just one bit of advice I want you to pass on to business owners is don't let them off the hook. He said, you make it sound too much like you're completely delegating this responsibility to a systems champion. And it's
Mm.
not like you just go, all right, this is your problem now. You deal with it. The business owner still needs to be involved. They still need to understand what's going on. They need to set the appropriate standard for the team because the team looks to the business owner for leadership. The business owner sets the vision for the company and the way that they want things to be. And everybody's looking to the leader to say, well, how should I be acting within the business? So they need to buy in on this idea, support the systems champion, and start to have some regular meetings. Like maybe this becomes a weekly 45-minute hour meeting where we plan out what are the next 2 or 3 things you're going to be working on, what are the systems you're documenting, where are you getting stuck, introducing some of the tools that can help the systems champion move quicker. I think the key is just to get the discussion going, and the business owner needs to say, this is what we're doing, and I'm looking for the team members who are going to sort of help us get on board with this. A lot of business owners, what's funny in the entrepreneur's brain is they think that because they don't like following process, that their team doesn't like following process. But because we're wired a little bit different as entrepreneurs, great team members actually like to know how to do a good job. A system and a process outlines a standard. It shows them how they can win and how they can get answers to their questions without having to go to the business owner all the time. So they want process and they'll really excel with it. So it's about bringing up and having the discussion. I feel like workshops is probably one of the most underutilized tools here in the early days. You need to be having little team meetings and check-ins, depending on the size of your team. Maybe it's per department or maybe it's everybody together where you talk about this and then you say, right, we need to get this in place and what are we going to do to keep ourselves accountable? Because the business owner will get distracted, team members will get distracted, they'll forget about this, other things will take priority. You need to work at this. And the last point I'll say is the results are not immediate. There's a lag time here. Systems take time to cook. It's before it hits that exponential curve. And that's why most business owners and businesses give up too early on it. They'll start for a month or two. It won't quite go the way that they think. And then they'll move on to, the next Facebook ads campaign that gives them the immediate dopamine hit, as opposed to the systems that are the slow boil, but really deliver the ultimate result.
Would you say that's like the killer mistake is giving up too early?
It's a little bit like brain surgery, in that if you stop partway through brain surgery, it can be fatal. And I think if you start systems and you stop partway into the exercise, why it is so fatal is because then the team and the business goes, we tried that before and it doesn't work for us. We're too creative. Our business can't be systemized. We're too special. And the whole team thinks that that's the case. And it's just that you didn't have the right approach and you didn't stick with it long enough. So it does more damage than good if you start and stop.
That makes sense. Yeah, you definitely want a surgeon who enjoys processes, I guess.
And
Huh?
likes to finish. I want a surgeon who likes to finish.
And so if I ever need surgery, I have a new question to add to
That's
the
right.
list. Shawn, talking about scaling businesses, what would you say is the biggest sign that a business is ready and able to scale?
Well, all businesses should be ready to scale. I mean, the whole point of starting a business should be with the mind of that we're going to go beyond just providing a job for the person who started it. Now, there are a lot of people who are self-employed, tradespeople, doctors, lawyers. That's fine. That's a decision. but there's a lot of people walking around saying, I have a business that don't, as I mentioned before. And so really, most people say, well, I don't need a process right now because it's just me or it's me and one other person. And so we're good. And when I start hiring people, I'll start worrying about process. Problem is, especially if you're doing something good and you start growing, now you don't have time to do the process. And now you really need it. So, number one, even if you're a solo practitioner, I don't care where you are in your entrepreneurial journey, if you haven't started documenting process, you need to do it now. The best time to start was a month ago. The second best time to start is today. So number one, you're never too small for process and to get that done. And very much to David's point, there's a big one mistake I see entrepreneurs make is they don't delegate, they abdicate, which they hand it off to somebody else. It's your problem now, you deal with it. And as he said, you can't do that. That's not delegation. Delegation is saying, here's what my expectation is. Here's the result I would like. You go do it, and I'm going to check in with you along the way, and we'll make sure that you're still on the right path. So you have to have the responsibility of checking in with those people and making sure that it's going the way that you had wanted it to go. So that's the difference there. So you've got to make sure that you're delegating and not abdicating. And again, I'll reiterate, regular meetings. You need to, if you're a traction follower, do your level 10 meeting. I don't care if it's a weekly strategy meeting, but you need to have regular team meetings where you can share ideas. You can all get the information that everybody else has so that you can make good decisions. And for me, being the person who needs that dopamine hit and wanting to move fast, one of the concepts that really helped me going into team meetings and making decisions to move forward with something and even a process is keep in mind when you make that decision, nothing's cast in stone. And I always, whenever we make a decision in a meeting now, I always refer to it as an experiment. This is brand new. We don't know if we got the right answer or not. And people who sit there and say, this is the way to do it, this is the right way. Well, you don't if you haven't done it before. You think it is, but you don't know. So one of the things that entrepreneurs can do is go into those meetings, come to a decision with your team and say, okay, we're going to run this experiment for 90 days. We're going to run the process this way, and then we're going to look at the results and we're going to analyze the data and we're going to figure out, did we get it right? And if we didn't, we can tweak it. We don't have to throw it out, but we can fix it or tweak it and nudge it and refine it. And we can go, okay, now we're going to go another 90 days. So I get my dopamine hit and saying, hey, let's run the experiment and see what we get. So approach it that way. David, you correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I don't look at there's no process that is ever done and complete. It's there. You have to go back and you have to be reviewing it because things change. Right now, AI is going to start changing a lot of process. And contrary to popular belief, it's not going to replace process. I truly believe before you introduce AI, you have to have the process, and AI can help accelerate it, but it's not going to replace it. But there's always a reason to reevaluate. Is this process still right? So David Marquet in Leadership as Language talks about red work and blue work. Red work is when we follow the process. But in order to be good organizations, we need to be inserting blue work, which is thinking work. And it's, okay, we followed the process. Did we get the result we wanted? If not, why? What do we need to do? How can we make the process better the next time we run it? So there's time to follow the process, and then there's time to evaluate the process. And you need to have both.
Now, you both have started, scaled, sold businesses, and then wash, rinse, and repeat. What is something that you believe now about growth that you didn't believe earlier in your career?
I thought every business was a little bit different. And I used to think they're all quite unique and special. the more businesses that I work with, the more alike I realize they are. They're more alike than they are uh, dissimilar, in that they all need to generate leads. They all need to convert those leads. They all need to deliver the product and service. They all need to manage their money, what goes in and out of the business. They need to manage the team, how they recruit and onboard and look after the team members. And they all need to really have some sort of management that helps to set the strategic vision and direction for the company. So maybe there are differences in the delivery. Someone is selling blue widgets and someone else is selling red towels. So maybe the delivery piece, but outside of that, business, there are a lot of transferable processes. And I realized that each business, I'm building up my systems and my processes, which are effectively, it's like a database of solutions to previous problems that I've solved. And now when I move into a new business, I'm rolling out these existing systems, and each business that I run, we're able to move quicker because we're building upon the foundations that we had before.
Yeah, I mean, David, I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with over the years where I go into these entrepreneurial environments and they go, well, we're special. We're different. I know this is the way we're supposed to do it, but we're the exception. And time again, I have to tell them, no, you're not a snowflake. You're not special. Move on. And business is business, and it really doesn't matter what the business is. As David said, every company has all business is an exchange of value. That's what it is. You're getting something of value. You're giving me of something of value. And if one of us isn't getting value, then it doesn't work. And the smoother that process goes, the better it is. And that's it. That is business in a nutshell. Now, the one thing I will say that I have seen and come to the conclusion with is that in working with entrepreneurs who have started multiple businesses, or people who, we refer to as serial entrepreneurs, there's a big difference between serial entrepreneurs and people who are running their first business. And that is that with serial entrepreneurs, when they start a new business, they know exactly what the end game is. The day they start it, they know what their goal is to get out. There's a beginning and an end on day one. Those of us, when we're in it for the first time, we're just trying to survive. We're just trying to make sure we pay the mortgage, keep the lights on. And we forget about that there's a potential end game, and that everything we're doing now is really going to dictate whether that end game is good or bad. And my first thing when I work with a new company now, especially if it's an entrepreneur in their first business, is the very first question is, what's the end game? Where's the finish line? What's the exit plan? Now, it doesn't mean that they have to be ready to exit. And it doesn't mean that line can't move in the future if the business does well, but there's got to be a target to get there. And those, when you have that, now you can build your processes and your systems around that target. And it's much easier because there's a finish line to aim for.
It feels like that's the reward for the hard work too. Like the business owner will get their biggest payday for those late nights, early mornings, weekends, grinding it out, papering over the cracks, those, restless times when all they can think about is work. The reward is the exit when you sell the business. That is the biggest payday that you're ever going to have. And I find it really sad that a lot of business owners never get that opportunity because they don't build a business that someone would want to buy because they've built a job. They've not built a business. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this work, because the reason I feel for business owners of this particular size is because I am that business owner. I know it because I've lived it, and I feel for these business owners that are some of the hardest working biggest contributing to society, people who don't have enough support, don't have enough people to lean on. They oftentimes can feel very isolated because they can't necessarily share everything necessarily with the team. It can be, it's a tough gig. You've got to be a certain type of crazy to be a business owner, and I believe you should be rewarded for that. You take on that risk, you should have the reward for that at the other end.
And that is where our Encore strategic peer groups really help, is with that isolation, so that you have a team of people to bounce ideas off of.
I love a good plug.
Right? I'm full of them. That being said, hopefully those folks are listening to this episode. They're hearing about the systems. They're hearing about what they can do to create a scalable, sellable business. Now, where can they go to find information about Systemology and the Systems Champion and the Pumpkin Plan for Managed Services?
Best place for us is, probably just Amazon. If you go to Amazon and you search Systemology, you'll come across the book. If you're listening to this, you're an audio person, so there's an audio version of the book as well. And if you want to go a little bit deeper, it's just systemology.com, and we've got a lot of additional resources to help you and your systems champion make this happen.
Yeah, and Amazon as well for the Pumpkin Plan for Managed Service Providers in print and in audio and in Kindle. As you said, if you're an entrepreneur and you need some accountability, our Encore Strategic Peer Groups at encorestrategic.io are the groups that are going to hold you to doing what you say you're going to do.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for joining me today and for talking about this. It's such important information for those entrepreneurs out there, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you.